Alright, so going over a hand from PokerStars 1-2, playing 8 max. We are under the gun with Jiggities, Pocket Jacks. We opt to open raise, obviously, only decision to make there. We get a call from a villain here in middle position. This villain is a good regular. We have played 133,000 hands with this villain. VPIP 17, percent raise 11, 3-bet 4. Those are good, standard, tight, aggressive, regular, winning poker player stats. We get a call from the button. Villain 9 here. They VPIP 33% of the time, percent raise 16, 3-bet 8% through 1,000 hands. They are very loose, very wide, very aggressive. Like those are lag stats that I think make sense live. Maybe you could win live. Online, you're just gonna get crushed, especially 9 max. We get a call from the small blind. GTO tells you never to call from the small blind, but people do it plenty in practice. This villain only started the hand with what 62 and a half big blinds. Probably not. I mean, I'm just criticizing people, but like obviously not great. This person VPIPs 29% of the time, raises 13% of the time, 3-bet 5% of the time. This is through 13,000 hands. So, loose. Their aggression stats are actually kind of similar to mine, but the VPIP being that high, like you're just not going to make money. So then we go to the big blind who goes ahead and folds. So we're 4-way here with an overpair, 6-6-7, flush draws. Like let's think about our villains' ranges here, right? Like pocket sixes, there's one combination of pocket sixes. Pocket sevens, again, pretty rare. What might the villains have? The villains might have 8-9. 4-5, again, like that seems, even for some of the looser players, that seems very loose. So 8-9, okay. They could have a flush draw. They could have pocket eights. They could have overcards. I think it makes sense to bet here to try to get some value and protection. And I think that if someone raises, you then reevaluate. And I have to go on the bigger side with my bet here. And I get a call only from the button, who is playing very loose. And I think the fact that there's an open raise and a call, this person, and they're in position for the hand, they're going to be calling very wide. Now, don't love this card, right? Because 5, 6, 7, right? 8, 9, any two clubs here. So there's some danger there. So I have to go ahead and check. And if you've listened to me talk about this before, you know that I check turn from out of position very often with these made hands. This isn't a strong made hand, but this is a made hand. This has showdown value. This also has equity to improve because could have the fourth one hit the board. Could have a jack or a 6 hit the board, in which case I'd feel pretty okay about my hand. But I think this is just one of those spots where you have enough equity, right? And you can see the odds up here. It's showing this, like, I don't know if you can see it on the screen, but 3.09 to 1, so 24%. So, if you think you've got 24% equity realization, obviously you have 24% equity against your opponent's betting range here, but do we have, like I said, because they're going to be bluffing, because you have ability to improve, all that sort of stuff, because they're going to show up to here with a wide range, and they're also going to bet here with a wide range. Whenever you check the people on the turn from out of position, people just bet. They bet with their entire range. So, I think I have good equity against my opponent's range, and I think I will realize my equity pretty well as well, because whenever you call turn and you get to the river, it's just very rare that people will river bluff. The pots get big, and they know they need to make a big bet to throw you off their hand, and if it's kind of a wet board, they worry that you may be trapping them. People just tend not to bet river very often. This is a pretty easy call on the turn, and then if they bet big on the river, I can go away. Alright, so we get to 8 here, so 5, 6, 7, 8. So you actually have a forerunner to a straight flush, which is interesting. I do have the flush. I don't have a 5 or a 9, but do have a flush. Feeling pretty good about that. But again, you kind of don't want to see the villain bet. This is one of those you kind of just hope to get the showdown with. And I opt to check. Villain opts to check. Villain has 7-8. So this is one of those spots where it's kind of like, what were they doing betting on the turn, right? Because okay, 5, 6, 7, 8. You have a forerunner to a straight. You have a straight draw, but there's 3 of the same suit on the board. So what are you doing there? You also have top pair, but it's a low pair board. I mean, I guess that they're betting for protection, maybe. But again, you're like, it's just it makes sense. Like 7-8 suited, you could actually 3-bet that pre-flop. You could call. I think that's fine. I think calling the flop bet from their perspective makes sense because they have top pair. I think on the turn, you don't really improve, right? Like, I think this is where people make a lot of mistakes, is this turn, and this is why I love to exploit it. But on the turn here, you have a strong hand, but not that strong of a hand. Like, whenever you have those marginal hands, a lot of time you just want to get the showdown cheaply, right? You don't want to build a pot with like a pair of 7s and a straight draw on a board where somebody could have a flush. Like, you don't want to build that pot. I mean, maybe he's just hoping to take it down, but again, like, I'm not going anywhere if I have a flush draw there. Like, if I have a nut flush draw or something, if I have the ace, I'm just not going anywhere. So it's not gonna get me to fold out a whole hell of a lot, especially just betting half pot there. Like, if he goes and bets pot or makes an overbet, that kind of makes some sense. But again, like, I think Jonathan Little once said, whenever I have a draw and a made hand, I kind of just play it like I have the made hand as opposed to the draw, especially with like those marginally strong hands, So it's, and again, like, you have a draw on a paired board and a board with 3 of the same suit. So like, yeah, full house beats a flush beats a, you know what I mean? Flush beats a straight. So like, even if you improve, you're not improving to the nuts. So it doesn't make sense really to bet it as a draw when you have that made hand and everything else. So I'm just, I don't think their turn bet makes a lot of sense, but it built the pot up for us, which is great. We'll take it. And then that river card there, like, I'm feeling great about my showdown value, but again, like, this is another spot where I'm going to check that, and look, I mean, some of you might say, oh, when I play live, people bluff the river all the time, blah, blah, blah. Look, my experience, people don't have the guts to bluff river big very often. Like, they're not going to raise your bet on the river with air. They're not going to bluff the river. And, like, I feel like whenever I was younger, like more naive, I guess, like, I would bluff the river a lot, like, because I had a nut blocker or something, and it's like, okay, there's 3 hearts on the board, I have the ace of hearts, I'm going to bet, like, I'm just going to jam river, and people aren't folding their flushes, right? Like, and it's like, all right, what are you actually trying to get to fold? But anyway, this is just a solid pickup. I think Villain misplayed their hand a little bit. I think that I played it pretty well. Going 4-way, you kind of have to, like, this is an example of where you kind of have to be a little bit careful because you're going 4-way, but at least that on the flop folded out 2 other players, so you can just then focus on playing heads up, which I think is a lot more interesting and, like, strategically, there's more to note. Whenever you play multi-way, you kind of just default to playing your cards face up to an extent. And look, I mean, playing multi-way is fine. Like, whenever you play live, you have to play a lot of multi-way, and it can get really boring because you just, like, you're just not going to win as many pots with people just sticking around. But also, whenever you're playing a tight range and your opponents are playing a loose range, you just inevitably have an advantage, and you're just going to print money over the long term. And just sometimes you get those really boring sessions, which is why I prefer to play online, where you get into a lot more heads-up stuff, and I can play several tables at the same time. Online obviously is tougher sledding, but yeah, if you can make it online, you can make it anywhere, as the saying goes. But anyway, just kind of an interesting spot.